Hey friends, welcome back. I hope your day's going well. Wherever your day is, I hope that you're having a good day. Today I want to talk about what happens when we give our family and our loved ones a version of ourselves that other people don't get, and which way that can go. It can go good, it can go bad. We're going to talk about that today. Before we do that, though, I do want to answer a question. Somebody reached out to me and they said, hey, I appreciate the rule of three. To be honest with you, I really was a little nervous about putting that out there. I wasn't sure what kind of reception it was going to get. And by and large, people seem to like it, enjoy it, and there were some questions. And one of the questions was, would you recommend that rule of three for family members? Would you recommend that rule of three, like between a husband and a wife? And I think that's a great question, so I want to spend a few minutes answering that.
You're listening to The Joe Martino Show, a podcast dealing with all things emotional, relational, and human nature. Joe is a licensed counselor in the state of Michigan, specializing in relationship therapy. He is also the author of the book, The Emotionally Secure Couple. All advice offered in this episode is offered for entertainment and educational purposes only. Enjoy the show.
So if you're new here, just a few weeks ago, I talked about, I think it was September 17th, I talked about the rule of three. So you have a conversation with someone and you lean into it and they say something, maybe you ask some clarifying questions because you're a good listener, and then you respond, that's one, then you do it again and that's two, and then you do it again and that's three. And if by that point you've gotten to where there just isn't any more information, you both are saying the same thing, you're just disagreeing, then it's time to kind of like, hey, you know what, maybe we should stop. I also blogged about it. It is on my blog at joemartino.com. Click on Emotionally Inclined and you can find it there, rule of three. But somebody asked a question. They said, hey, what about husbands and wives? Do you and Erica do that? And the truth is, Eric and I do not follow the rule of three for three. And what I mean by that is there have been multiple conversations. I came up with a few. I'm sure if I asked her, she would come up with a few where we just are like, you know what, we're just going to have to agree to disagree, or neither one of us are presenting any more information to the other person so that there's anything going on. And so by just continuing this, we're just repeating ourselves and everybody's feeling their emotions get up. So why is that helpful? And so we'll have regular conversations where we're like, let's stop. And, I've talked about this numerous times on the podcast about how I have, my wife and I had an 18-month fight. And I talk about that. And I'm like, okay, so we have an 18-month argument where, maybe not fight. I know I said I tend to use fight and argument interchangeably when I talk about her and I. And that's not helpful to you because on my podcast, I have made a distinction between fights and arguments. But we've had arguments where we pick it up, we put it down, we pick it up, we put it down. And we've gone 18 months. And one time I was doing a marriage conference and we were talking about that. And she said, hey, did you mean this one? And I said, no, I meant this one. And she was like, oh, I thought you were talking about this one. I was like, no, I was considering this one. And without a lot of work, we came up with 4 or 5 conversations that we've had where we had to put it down. And sometimes we put it down for an extended period of time because we don't need to come to a decision on it. And other times we've not put it down for an extended period of time because we do have to come to an agreement on it. And so we have to decide that. We have to talk that through. And we have to decide, okay, is this something that we have to solve soon? If it isn't, then we just continue to move on. We can put it down. And the key here is that we continue to act as though life is normal because it is. We have just found an item, an action item or an ideology item or something where we disagree. And we start with the expectation that we do not expect to agree on everything. So what I mean when I say we don't follow the rule of three is we might go 7 times, we might go 8 times, we might go 9 times, and we're going to judge it. And I did talk a little bit about that, about the different relationships. You're going to go more, there's going to be times where you keep going, but there does come a point where I think people just realize we're not going to agree and no one's saying anything new, so we can stop. And, there's nothing wrong with being like, okay, so that point right there, that's just where we disagree. And maybe we pick it up again in 2 days. Maybe we pick it up again in a week. Maybe we don't pick it up again at all. You have to decide that. Which does bring me to today's topic, which is, what version of you does your family get? What version of me does my family get? Because one of the things, a number of years ago, I was at a funeral and a guy was talking about his dad. And he said, the thing that I learned about my dad was the version that we got at home wasn't the version that everyone else got. And in that situation, it wasn't a good thing. The dad that they got at home was grumpy. The dad that they got at home was not gregarious. The dad that they got at home did not like to do things. And the dad that everyone else got was different, was those things. He was gregarious. He was goofy. He was funny. He would do anything for anyone. And what happened was that this guy that's talking at his dad's funeral, he basically said, like, I need to figure out how do I reconcile the two people that my dad was. And, here's the thing. We are going to be grumpier with our family. In theory, they should be the safest people we know. I know that's not always true, but we are going to be different at home than we are in public. But how much different should we be? How much better should we be at public? I talk to people a lot, and they will work harder at a work relationship than they do at a home relationship. They will do things for perfect strangers more readily than they will for their own families. And some of that is we want to be generous people. We want to be people that are well known for doing kind things. And when people need help, we want to do that. And I wonder, what is the cost when we go that route? Now, there are other people who, they're very disciplined. The person that their family gets is their more truer version of themselves. It is the funny person. It is the gregarious person. It is the person talking about, hey, I can help you with that. And so the question regularly becomes, who are you at home and who are you in public? That's literally today's whole podcast question. I want to ask you, who are you at home and who are you in public? And I want to try to encourage you to consider that you want those two people to be relatively close to each other. You want those two people to be relatively similar. You want both of those people to be people that are the same person. In other words, I don't really want to be, I just got done with a men's group. I don't really want to be one guy for my men's group and then another guy for my sons. I don't really want to be one guy at work and one guy for my wife. Now, there are some obvious exceptions to that. My wife and I will have conversations that I'm not going to have with coworkers. My kids and I will have conversations that I'm not going to have with coworkers. I'm going to have different levels of vulnerability with people that I'm more intimate with. I'm going to have different levels of vulnerability with people that I'm not very intimate with. There's going to be people like the closer we get into our inner circles, those conversations are going to look different. But I'm talking about the ability to endure discomfort relationally. Most people tend to focus on doing that at work. So when they come home, they're grumpy. And here's the thing, I'm not actually arguing to be grumpy at work. What I'm actually trying to suggest is if you can do it at work, you can do it at home, and there's probably no real negative outcomes for you by forcing yourself to have some level of self-control over how you respond to relational distress. And the thing that I really want to kind of just hang out on here for a few minutes is your ability to tolerate relational distress is a muscle that you develop. It is a muscle that grows. And so the longer you are able to hear something, to engage in something, because it's good for your relationship with your wife, your husband, your kids, the better that muscle becomes, right? Your kids don't need a grumpy dad that everyone likes. I know a guy that he's well into his 70s now, and I knew him in his 50s and maybe 60s. And he talks a lot about how what would happen with people with his dad is he would get lost when he would hear people talk about his dad, because his dad at home would just hit him upside the head. His dad was abusive. His dad was very strict. His dad would holler. His dad would scream. And then in public, his dad was this well-known person that everybody loved. And he was like it was just so hard for me to reconcile the two. And he's like, I would find people at my dad's funeral. This is what the guy quoted to me. He said, at my dad's funeral, people were crying and I was just numb, not from the grief of him dying, but from the grief of I didn't know the version of my dad that those people knew. And what I'm actually suggesting is that guy's dad could have been the same person in both places. He could have brought that guy who was helpful, who was patient, who was kind, who didn't lose his behaviors when his temper flared in public, he could have brought that public guy home and could have interacted there. He could have impacted his son in the same way that he impacted the kids on his sports team. And that is something that I think we're losing for a host of reasons. I've talked about this numerous times. We've given up on this idea of personal responsibility, and we've moved to personal rights. We've given up on doing things that are best for the relationship. We've given up on being uncomfortable. We're going to talk about that this season for sure. What does it mean to be uncomfortable? And what is the cost of our obsession? And so today, I just want to ask you really, really simply, does your family get the same version of you that the public gets? And is that the version that is healthy for them? Is that the version that moves them forward? Is that the version of you that is your best version? Now, there's going to be times where we're home, we don't want to do something. My son wanted to learn how to play NCAA football the other day. And I was like, not right now, buddy. I'm going to go to bed. But the truth is, if somebody called me up and wanted to do something of equal weight, like they needed help doing something that isn't going to really impact the quality of their life, I would tell them, I can't help you right now. I'm about to go to sleep. I mean, if they called up and they're like, hey, my house is on fire. All right, I'm leaving the house, right? I'm going to go help them. But so I want to make sure that my son gets the same version of me that my friends get. I want to make sure that my wife gets the best version of me. My wife gets the most attentive version of me. My wife gets the version of me that thinks of her first. And if we're doing that, I don't see a lot of cost. I see a lot of upside. I see a lot of value. I hear people all the time, they're willing to let their wife get mad at them or their husband get mad at them, but not their siblings. That makes zero sense to me. 0 cents. Why would you be okay with a person that you have promised to love forever unconditionally? Why would you be okay hurting them or they'll just have to deal with it because that's my family? That just doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't track. A little sidebar here, a little ADHD. One of the most interesting things to me is people who give their family members advice not knowing the whole situation. And a lot of times I know about it because I live in a small town and I'm meeting with somebody in a professional role. And then the other family member talking to me and they don't know that I see their family member. I'm not going to tell them because that would be a HIPAA violation. I want to keep my license. And they're telling me about the advice that they gave their family member. I'm like, oh, cool. And I walk on. Right. But it's so weird to me how often people are like, you just have to tell people this is who you are and they have to deal with it. Now, the rub is, and I talk about this a lot, in the right dose, that's a healthy version. That's a healthy thing. But if I have to choose between anybody and my wife, I'm picking my wife, dude. You all lose. I promise. And I hear guys like, oh, they're gone every night of the week because they're doing good things. The best thing you can do is love your wife well. And it just drives me crazy when, well, yep, you know what? My sister's coming to visit and my wife doesn't like it. My wife will just have to deal with it. In my own family, I've lived this out. I don't really want to talk about this too much. I once heard somebody say, talk from your scars, not your wounds. And I think this is still a wound. But I had a family member come to kind of split up my family, try to turn my family one against the other, repetitively bring toxicity to my family. And when I say to my family, I mean to my wife, my 3 daughters, and my son. And at one point I finally said, okay, I'm done. We're not talking anymore until you can own that you did this and you can own that you need to change some things. And if you can't do that, I can't be in relationship with you. And I grieve that. I grieve the distress of that. I grieve the hurt in that. I grieve the sorrow in that. And yet, I want my family to have the best version of me. And I do think that we're going to have to consider two things here. One, balance. We always have to talk about balance. We always want to talk about how balanced are we, because there's going to be times where we are reaching out for people outside of our home. But the characteristics that we want our children to embody, the character that we want our life to exhibit, we have to have at home. And one of the things that some of you, I'm sure, are considering is, well, okay, Joe, I'm killing this. Like, I'm actually pretty good at this. And that may be true. And if it is, I say to you, awesome. But I have found that it is beneficial to double check with those I love to make sure that that's true. I have found that it's beneficial to go to my kids and be like, hey, how well am I doing prioritizing you? Go to my wife, how well am I doing prioritizing you? How well do you feel that my public life and my private life match? Am I the same person both places? I talked earlier about the man's funeral, talking about his dad's funeral, actually. I was also talking to a woman one time who told me, she was like, my dad was not the same person in private and in public, but he often explained why. He often explained the push on that. And he always exhibited the characteristics that he wanted us to have. He always exhibited being the person that he wanted us to be. He was that person. And that's the type of thing we're talking about. Because one of the things that runs here, there is this awful truth that just circles our lives. The people that we are best at scamming is ourselves. We are the best at scamming ourselves. We tell ourselves the best lies. We tell ourselves the best justifications. We tell ourselves the best stories that tend to put our intentions above our actions, that tend to move our life towards what we want it to be, even if our actions don't follow it up. And so one of the things that we have to do if we're going to be intentional about these two lives coming together is we have to just absolutely, we have to audit ourselves to make sure that we're not scamming ourselves. All right, so that's today's episode. I hope that you enjoyed it. If you've enjoyed this at all, I would ask two things of you. I would ask for you to share it everywhere that you can. I just can't tell you how much that would help me. If you listen to this, and I know that there are some people out there that have listened to it for a long time, just slap it up on your Facebook, on your socials, whatever, Snapchat, whatever it is you're using, Instagram. I cannot tell you how helpful that would be to me. And if you haven't already, give me a review in the Apple Store, Spotify Store, wherever you're listening to it. All right, thanks so much for listening. We'll catch you next week.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed today's show, please share with a friend. And hey, give us that rating in your podcast store. Until next time, change possible.